What's going on, coin traders? Thanks for joining me for another video. Looking at Bitcoin right now, specifically because we are leading the way. We know that Bitcoin dominance is approaching 60%, which is just clearly showing what a dominant setup right now. And especially if we actually look out and zoom out here on this weekly chart, just highlighting how good of a setup this is, especially over the last 6 to 7 months here, just entering this longer term flag pattern. And especially what's good about this setup right now is that if we do want to take a trend line and actually look at these resistance points over the last week, the week that closed here a week ago on Sunday, very nice breakout, and especially the current week has been testing and actually back testing this resistance trend line. So since on the current weekly candle, we haven't fallen back down below, we're still looking at this being a very good sign, especially after breaking this resistance trend line, proving multiple tests of resistance. Now finally breaking it on the current and back testing it. In fact, if we actually flip over into the current daily candle setup right now, you can see how zooming out, that was our point for resistance. Zooming in right now, that is our trend line for support. And we can see how much we've actually held this level of closing support for the daily chart here. And price level for that is going to come in nicely right above the 66,500 line. So very nice support on top of that. Looking left, that's actually our big point of resistance here on this move before pulling back to set our current longer term lower support just above the $60,000 level. Now flipping back into the weekly, plenty more to talk about. Specifically, want to look at the supports of the weekly on top of the 12 and 26. We know that these are extremely nice supports because when we do actually find support being held in between the 12 and 26, especially after finding so much longer term support in between the 26 and the 50 period EMA, that just shows a lot more strength and a lot more indication that these upside exponential moving averages are a very good indication of the upside trend coming in, especially when we have two very big downside shadows followed by this very nice upside candle where we do have most of the body of the candle this whole week of trading actually fitting inside. So if we look at the upside wick, very minimal, downside shadow, very minimal. So most of the body of this candle is actually just the bulls pushing prices up. And then if we go ahead and look left, we're actually looking at a price level on top of the previous level of closing resistance for the week. So if we actually look at where we hit, we're looking right around just above the $68,000 level for the close on the weekly in this instance. So we did get a very nice bullish cross above that. Current week trying to rally over the next hour and a half until this weekly closes. Not necessarily super optimistic, and it's not necessarily that big of a deal, mostly because we are looking at the trend line as a very big indication, especially since we were in kind of more or less this longer term flag type pattern. So now I want to pull up the VPVR volume profile visible range, because if we actually look at the side here, big point of mass, we're actually sitting on top of that. So big point of mass coming in right around 67,600. And obviously right now with prices being over 68, very nice upside. And then if we look at the remaining volume here, it does start to taper off, which should indicate less resistance up overhead, since we do know that we will be looking at upside all-time highs here and a blue sky breakout here before too long, because prices right now are mostly above the typical previous trading history max and peaks that we have been looking at typically before, which does mean a lot more upside pressure and being able to rely on that downside mass for price levels as that support. Cruising over to the technicals on the weekly here, do want to look at specifically this RSI, how we have talked about before, ever since being below this moving average for the RSI, did now break above it and finding support. So hopefully this can roll up and still maintain as that support trend line to the upside as we do see this RSI start to head back. So as long as we do see the RSI maintain a nice trend on top of this EMA, that's going to be a very good sign as well. But ideally, we do just overall want to see higher highs and higher lows being put in and set for this RSI. Stochastic RSI is still looking really good, trending to the upside, very nice, and still well below this 80 line here. So haven't necessarily got to that point where we think a reversal is coming in yet. But this is all after many months here, or weeks, of being over and below the 20 line. So we know that a lot more upside pressure is still in store. So we could actually see it kind of do the opposite effect here right above the 80 line. Pulling up the MACD, moving average convergence and divergence, now had a very nice back test and get close to the 0 line with a very nice bullish cross and confirmation now. So still looking at a little bit more upside direction, and we should start to see probably the prices start to head out from these exponential moving averages, which should start to help maintain this trend back to the upside here. Histogram bars down on the bottom are back above the zero line, trending nicely to the upside as we've had that nice bullish cross. So a lot of great things happening in that instance on the MACD. Switching over to the 2-day really quick, very nice setup here, especially as we have a little bit of a flag type pattern pulling back. So should see a nice upside if we do get confirmation of a nice upside breakout. Right now, like we talked about, being able to defend the most upper exponential moving average is always the best sign for continuation. So even if we are looking at a flag pattern for continuation, hypothetically anyway, and looking at a little bit of a better target, we could be looking at a potential breakout up to about 78,000. Not necessarily guaranteed, obviously, and a lot of potential for upside resistance getting stuck. But because we've already seen the trend change and a lot of these resistance trend lines being smashed, we are pretty much going to be looking up overhead here at 71,500 as being one of the big levels for resistance. So big point of getting stuck up at this level. Even the second test attempt that we had got stuck up once again. So very realistic to think over the coming weeks and potentially even the coming days here, since we are only about, let's see what this is in percentages, about 5% from this level. So that's essentially one nice trading day here, or two slower trading days, or whatever we have. But anyway, and once we do get this nice upside test, would be looking at potentially seeing a very nice break of that. Like we said, trend is already in the favor, and this is set up for a very nice potential breakout with an upside target to potentially about the $78,000 level. So a break of that would likely see the potential for a $78,000 Bitcoin price, probably before then pulling back and back testing this level's confirmation. That would be one of the very nice setups that I would actually anticipate for breaking this all-time high and setting that. Quick zoom in here on the daily. Just want to talk about the last week and what's so significant about this previous or current setup right now is that if we actually look down at the volume, the most recent 2 days of bullish upside, as well as some of the previous days, for example, when we were looking at putting in our current trend high right now, very minimal volume. And especially if we have seen bear volume hasn't necessarily been as minimal, but for seeing this amount of bear volume compared to such weak bull volume, we actually do have a little bit set up in favor of the bulls here, because bears aren't really putting up much defense right now, which is why little volume can actually wipe out a lot of these trade days. Now, we know that with all of the long lower shadows here that have been very nice, because they have essentially put in a bottom above this 24 period exponential moving average. And what's significant too is that we have seen a lot of buying, and although the buying didn't necessarily see the daily candles close on top of this 12 period, they weren't that far below the 12 period EMA. So we know that when prices did actually get below the 12 period EMA, they were seeing a lot of buying from the bulls, and especially important because, like we said, maintaining this 24 period EMA is always an extremely good sign and a very good motive for the trend to continue to the upside or that direction when we are on that side of that trend with the 12 and 26 period EMA. So conversely, the opposite's also true. For example, if we flip this chart and we were looking at it in the inverse for a bearish type pattern, if we would look at a pullback, getting stuck up at this level does mean likely a lot more indication of a bearish pattern continuing in that shorter time period compared to, for example, if prices actually ran up, we could see a little bit more longer term consolidation before continuing that direction anyway. So if we do look at this in terms of the bullish trend, the opposite, just like we were talking about from the bears case, does mean upside direction is going to be true. So we are likely, more likely anyway, to see a little bit more of that upside direction. So very, very nice upside pattern direction like we talked about. And especially after putting in very nice upside gains, seeing our small volume indicate that trend high, pulling back, very minimal pullback here. And in fact, if we actually look at a Fibonacci retracement here from the low up to the high, currently looking at very nice defense on top of this 38.2% retracement, which is basically right at 65,500. So very nice defense. And like we said, very nice support, pretty much coming in just below this 23.6 support line. So very, very good setup in terms of how much we pulled back after a nice upside move and leg. Bitcoin does still maintain dominance, so we are expected to see Bitcoin run a little bit better than we are going to see from altcoins, but we know that money always does shift into altcoins later, especially once we do get a lot more attention and hype back in the cryptocurrency and blockchain sectors. So overall, since we have been seeing a pretty much lull, boring crypto space for the last 6, 7, 8 months, I do think that right now we're going to start to see what we have been patiently waiting for most of this year, where we actually do get our breakout and we do get a very nice fall and start of winter here, which should kick off, hopefully, a very nice crypto 2025 bull run. As always, though, do love hearing everyone's thoughts, comments, predictions, issues, disagreements, all that stuff down in the comments sections below. Do love chatting with you, or feel free to reach out over on Twitter or X at @coin_trades is the handle. Chat with you all there. That is going to go ahead and wrap it up for me now, though, so do appreciate all the love and support. If you haven't hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe just yet, stay tuned, and we'll keep you updated. Stay safe, everyone. I'll catch you back in the next video.